Many of our problems over the last 12 years in our economy have come from our financial service industry, and in particular, our giant Wall Street investment banks and money center global banks. They, along with the Fed, were deeply involved in creating the internet bubble, the housing bubble, and now the government spending bubble. I think we need a complete overhaul of our financial service industry, and not in the way that President Obama and Barney Frank and Chris Dodd did. Dodd-Frank was, in my view, a disaster. Why? It's just 2,200 pages of regulations that didn't really deal with the heart of the problems, and by the way, never talked about Fannie and Freddie. What did Dodd-Frank do, though, that was essentially wrong? It made these giant companies systematically important. What does that mean? It means that they're too big to fail. Therefore, if they get in trouble again, we as taxpayers will bail them out. What does that also do? It creates them in an advantageous position versus small and medium-sized financial companies. Why? Because if you know this bank will be bailed out by the government, you will lend to them or invest in them at a cheaper rate. Because you know they'll never fail, versus a smaller company that will. So we've actually created a distortion and have allowed these big companies that have access to Washington through lobbyists to have access to our taxpayer money. I think it's fundamentally wrong. I think we need to get rid of these too big to fail companies. If you're too big to fail, you're too big to exist. Either you need to be broken up or be forced to have so much capital that they'll want to shrink themselves. I think there's a whole raft of solutions instead of what Dodd-Frank did, much like the derivative markets, which was one of the big ticking time bombs in our global financial system back in '07, where we had over $50 trillion in notional value in our derivatives market. Instead of taking a private sector free market approach of forcing derivatives on an exchange just like we trade stocks, instead Dodd-Frank embedded that because it was written by Wall Street firms to protect what they have. So I think we need a real overhaul of our financial system, and I also think we need to think about reinstituting Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall was put in place because of what happened with the Great Depression and the role that Wall Street played in the creation of the Great Depression. I find it interesting that in 1998, Bill Clinton took away Glass-Steagall, and within a mere 10 years, we were right back with many of the same problems. Fundamentally, I believe we need free market and fair approaches to dealing with our financial service industry so we can let the small and community banks grow. Because right now we've had over 440 community banks that have failed since '07 and another 770 plus on our problem bank list. They're our gas station to small businesses. They're the ones that lend and help small businesses form and create jobs. So I think we need to start supporting the smaller companies and stop creating all the advantages for the giant banks.